All right, everyone. I hope you are staying warm and you had some nice hot chocolate. This video should probably be about a half an hour long or so, and it's going to go over a small lecture on space, and then we're also going to go over the bits of Photoshop that I showed everyone else in class earlier today, which is basically how to create space with a two-dimensional landscape by kind of selecting and cutting things up. All right, so space. There's a couple of different ways that we're going to be able to display space to people within a two-dimensional image, which we're going to be mainly working with here in digital tools. So there's this idea of linear perspective. There are a few other ways to create space, and then how to use space. So here are some ways to create space. This is how our eye kind of judges which things are closer and farther away from us. Now, our eye uses all of these different things together to give us a sense of space. Just like the sense of scale, if we don't, like that Magritte picture that we looked at, if we don't have other things to apply things to and then judge, by, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult to kind of judge these things. So what I've done is every single one of these different bullet points I've gone through and I've just isolated down to that one section. You'll see that some are a little bit stronger than others. Others are going to look a little bit weird, and then we'll put them all together. So let's first start off with overlap. So we've got our guy here and our lady. And obviously, if I were to ask you which one was closer, it would probably be the guy, because he's overlapping or in front of the other girl. So for us, it's closer to us because he's blocking out the rest of the lady in this. All right. In this next one, we get a sense of size variation. As things go farther and farther back away from us, they'll get smaller and smaller. As they get closer to us, they'll get bigger. So if you put your hand in front of your face, even though your hand is much, much smaller than a building, because it's closer to you, it's going to look bigger. It's going to take up more of your plane of view than a building that's farther away. So that's a way that we get a sense of size, is through the variation. Now here, because they're both on the same plane and on the same level, it just looks like one of them is either really big or one of them is really small. But if I were to move them around, it would look more like one of them was farther away. Probably, no, in all, it would be the guy, not the lady. Another one is the sense of definition. So the way our eyes work is that basically we are receiving all of the light that's reflecting off of everything else. So we're just seeing all the lights that's being reflected back. As something moves farther and farther away from us, the light that is coming back into getting our eyes is going to be dispersed by dust in the air, smoke, a whole bunch of different things. So as things go farther and farther away, more and more of that light is being refracted and not getting into our eyes. So there is going to be this sense of a loss of definition, and it's going to become blurrier and a little bit less sharp. So in this example, the guy is obviously closer. Location is also going to be something that shows us a sense of space within a two-dimensional image. So here, even though they're both the same size, because the lady is farther down in the picture plane or farther away from the horizon being the point where the sky and the ground meet, that means that they are closer to us. Now this is another one where it looks a little bit weird because of the variation in where they're at. Color is also a big identifier of where things are within space. So for that same reason that I was talking about before, the reason that things as they get farther away from us become blurrier, they also lose their color. Our eyes, and we'll talk about this when we talk about color in a few classes from now, our eyes actually have two different receptors in them. One of them just senses how bright or dark something is, and the other one senses color. Now we have a lot more what are known as rods, which are the ones that actually sense light and dark in our eyes, than the color receptors. So as that light's coming through, as more and more of it's kind of getting dispersed by all the junk that's in the air, we're going to get much, much less color information. So as things get closer to us, they seem much more vibrant. Also from a color standpoint, things that are generally warmer, like reds and oranges, are going to come closer to us or feel like they're closer to us than things that are cooler, like blues and purples. those are going to kind of fall further back. And that's because our atmosphere is blue, so as things go farther and farther back, they get more of a blue hinge to them, or hue, excuse me. And then if we put all of these elements together, a little bit of blurriness, the lack of color, where they are within respect to the horizon line, excuse me, then you're going to get all of the things that our eyes use to kind of judge which thing is closer and which thing is farther away. There are a couple other things that we can do to create the illusion of space and how to play with space. There's this idea of amplified perspective, fractured space, and layered space. We'll go over that right now. So amplified perspective is something that we saw a lot in the late 90s and early 2000s with those really large heads and the smaller bodies. We also see this a lot in comic books with like fists that are much larger than the face. And it's just really pushing that idea of perspective to the point that it looks like we're looking through like a wide angle lens. Fractured space is something else that kind of works within the idea of time and space. So here the space itself is being kind of fractured up into different times and locations. You can also look, this is an image of Henry Moore, that you can see that the camera is in a different position. His mouth, the pictures that were taken of his mouth are probably a little bit closer than the pictures of his face, so that sense of space is being fractured as well. And this is the last thing. This is once again kind of going into this idea of different layers of space. We really like to kind of have nice spots if you think about the idea of when we were talking about composition. So these different layers that are in this particular picture really give us a nice sense of progression from front to back. So in front we have the silhouette of the man walking, then we have the next picture plane of the dog, then we have the woman that's walking towards the building, and then there's even in that background there's even a sense of foreground, middle ground, and background. The foreground in that sense being the window doors, then the midground being those tables, and the background going all the way back to the wall and the open doors. So this is this idea of this layered space is what we're going to work with now in Photoshop, and we're actually going to create additional layers. So here we are in Photoshop, and I'm going to take Godzilla here, and since he's got a white background, I'm just going to select all of that background there, hold down Shift key to add in a little bit here to get around those sections, and that's close enough. We'll get right there. Okay, so then I'm going to go select and invert this, Command Shift I. Now I've got the marching ants just going around Godzilla there, and I'm going to copy that with Command C and paste that into this area right here, which is Melbourne, Australia. All right, and I'm going to turn him off. Now when we're working with layers, first thing is I'm going to call that Godzilla so that I know what that is, or Godzilla. We'll keep it that way for copyright infringement purposes. So if I want to turn things off within my layers window, all I need to do is just poke it in the eye. So you can see I've got these eyeballs here. When I poke it, it disappears. And now I'm going to go into my background here, and I'm going to allow these different planes of existence. So right now, if I were to, whoops, can't move that because it's locked, which is good. If I were to try to move Godzilla here, it seems like he's at the very front here, that he's very close to us. All right, but if I wanted to give him a sense of depth, just don't worry about that, just breaking into the Pentagon right now. If I want to give a sense of depth, it would be really cool if, like, let's say I could put him behind this kind of little monument here. So let's do that. I'm going to turn Godzilla off here and then go to my background so that I know that that is selected. And then it's going to be almost exactly like what we did with Godzilla here. I'm just going to go in, I'm going to pick the thing that I want within this plane here, and I'm just going to choose this image here. And since this is a nice square image, I'm going to go into my lasso tool and choose the polygonal lasso tool. The polygonal lasso tool is really nice for doing things like straight lines, like for instance the base of this monument here, and even these kind of long things. And now right here we've got these sort of statues, and that's not perfect. And if I were really trying to get this perfect, I would probably go in and clean those up with maybe a different selection tool. But for this, we're just going to go real fast now down here, and then I'm going to know that these two are going to be able to connect to each other because I'll get a little circle. And if I don't, I can always just hit enter there. So that's all selected. So I'm just going to copy this with Command C and then paste it. Now it doesn't look like anything's happened, but if I look over here in the layers section, I've got a new layer. And in fact, if I were to turn off the background, you'd see that I've just got that one part selected. I'm going to call this foreground monument. Okay, whoops. Or just foreground. We'll call monument. All right. So now if I turn this on here, Godzilla is still in front, but if I were to move that foreground piece up in front of him, now it gives us a sense that he's a little bit further back. And I can arrange this a little bit more. So now it feels like we've got that sense here that he's a little bit further back than the monument. And I'm just going to just shrink him down just a little bit. That was Command T that I pressed, just so he's not taking up so much of the picture plane. So now, there he is, and it looks like he's in, this is behind, Godzilla is behind this monument. All right, and so let's go even further here, turning Godzilla off here. And now, let's see if we can put him behind the trees. Now the trees are going to be a little bit more of a problem here because they're not straight. They've got a lot of leaves and different fuzz points in them. So instead of using my magic wand tool, I'm going to use the quick selection tool, which is right behind it. And how I got to that is I just held down and clicked on that. Now, I need to make sure that I'm going to be selecting off of the layer that has my background. So right now, if I were to go, it looks like I'm kind of getting certain things, but I'm not. What I'm actually doing is I'm selecting Godzilla there. All right, so if that ever happens, make sure you're on the right section. I'm going to deselect, Command D, go to my background here. Now that's selected, and I should get a much better selection of the trees here. All right, and now I'm not going to get everything perfect. Remember, the thing that I'm going to do is go back and deselect some of this, so don't worry. It looks like I got a little bit of that building up front there. I'm going to go back and fix that, and I got a little bit of the buildings up there as well. All right, so I got all that. Remember, if you hold down the Option key, see how it goes from the plus to the minus? So I'm going to come back here. Remember, when you're using Quick Selection Tool, always start from the outside and kind of slowly push in. That's really going to help it discover things. All right, getting closer here. Same thing, pushing in here. And so this is helping it kind of resample. I don't want those, I just want the trees. All right, get those little sections there. Same thing here. And I'm just kind of going through this pretty quickly. You're not going to get everything perfect, but once again, just enough. So now I've got this, and I'm also going to add on this part here, which is important. So now I've got this, but if you see, there's like little sections here where the tree kind of shows through, and we don't have all the leaves. So I'm going to go into the Refine Edge tool, and the Refine Edge tool is going to allow me to really get a nice mask on these leaves. So hit up here on the Refine Edge, you can see that I've got red here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the black on white so you can really see. So if I were to copy and paste this right now, you can see it's got this really hard edge, and I'm going to go through and then just once again kind of go across that, and you can see when I let go, you get that nice kind of halo with the trees. So this will let those leaves shine through, and this will give it a little bit of extra believability. Okay, and although not everything's perfect, we can always go back and clean that up as well. All right, and then if I just go back here, I remember that there was one section, the overlay, like right in here, where I'm just going to go over that to kind of get through that section as well, so you can kind of see through there. All right, that's pretty good. I'm going to hit OK. All right, and then I'm going to, once again, making sure I've got this background selected, copy with Command C, and paste with Command V. So now I've got this section. Double click on that, and I'm going to call this Midground Trees. All right. And so now, if I turn Godzilla back on here, he's still behind this, but if I were to drag him in between the background and the trees, you can see now that he's behind the trees. And he's a little bit low, so I'm going to just drag him up there a little bit. You can see there he is, and that feels a lot more, like especially right in this area, like he is further back. And that's making him look a little bit larger too, because in relation, when I bring him here, he's only in front of this, he's looking much smaller in relationship to if I were to bring him into the midground there. Now he's much larger because he's farther back in the field plane, which means he's probably going to be bigger in relation to that. All right, let me turn him off one more time, and let's put him all the way back behind these buildings here. So once again, we could go in and use the polygonal lasso tool, we could use a quick selection tool, but because this sky is so close in color and these buildings are really contrasty, I think this is an excellent time for me to use the magic wand tool. And I might need to up the tolerance a little bit, maybe to, let's try 75. There we go, and that's got everything. You can see it's just following through all this. A few antennas and stuff that we're going to miss, but once again, not too big of a deal. Now, remember, right now I'm choosing the sky, and what I want is to go to select, invert that. Now I've got all of this. Command C to copy, Command V to paste, and now I've got, I'm just going to put back, sorry guys, I've got my cable for my microphone go right across my keyboard here. Okay, so we've got our back for our building. So now if I turn Godzilla on here and I move him back behind the buildings, he looks much, much larger, right? So that means that now he's almost as big as these buildings here. So there's two more things that I want to show you. One is if we look at Godzilla in comparison to these buildings, he's actually much, much sharper than this. So we want to go in and we want to kind of create a similar blur. Now this is a destructive process, so what I'm going to do is, just to be safe, I'm going to make a duplicate of Godzilla by dragging him down to the new layer section here, and I'm just going to turn that off. That way, if I really mess anything up, I can always go back and fix it. So now with Godzilla selected, I'm going to zoom in, and as you can see here, we can see that the detail in Godzilla is very, very sharp compared to how blurry these buildings are. So I'm going to go up into my filter section up here. I'm going to choose blur, and there's a bunch of different blurs. I'm going to use Gaussian blur because it goes really fast. And I've got him crazy blurred here. And then what I'm going to do is, just with this zoomed in, I'm just going to kind of slowly bring the blur up until he feels like he's about as blurry as the buildings. So for me, that looks about right. Hit OK. And then we're going to zoom out here. All right. And you know, now here with the buildings, it's a little bit sharp. The other thing I'm going to do is, remember there's that idea of atmosphere. Him kind of, the color is pretty vibrant. He's about as vibrant here with this green as this. If you look at these buildings, they're all really kind of gray because they're kind of farther back, more in the atmosphere. So to fix that, if we go over to our layers section here, if you look at opacity, I can actually make him more opaque. So that looks like he's much more as part of the atmosphere here. And that's going to kind of make him feel like he's a lot more farther back than when he's fully transparent, because he's kind of falling back into that. Now this works really nicely when you're just doing something against the sky, because the sky is basically made up of all this stuff that kind of gets between us and our eyes. But if I move him up closer here, you can see that this makes him look like a gigantic ghost. So be careful with that. Right, so we've got him back there, and so that looks, for me, pretty good. The last thing I want to talk about is you're going to be working in black and white. So right now we've got a lot of contrast here because of color, but it might not work as well when we get rid of the color and we're just looking at value. So to fix this, we could go up to Image, Adjustments, and then go to like Hue and Saturation or Black and White and just make it black and white. But you don't want to do that because that's going to destroy everything. I want you guys, just in case now with this assignment, it's going to have to be in black and white, but When you're working on your own pieces, you might want to see what it looks like in black and white and just always have the ability to go back in color. And that's why Adobe has created this really nice option called Adjustment Layers. And it's right down here at the bottom of this section, of the Layers section right here. So if I click here, you can see I've got a bunch of different options. One of them is black and white. And when I click on that, you can see that I now get this new layer up here called black and white. And I can actually go through and adjust how dark or light different colors are. So all the yellow, you can see the yellow here in the grass is getting darker, or same thing with the green. I can make the green of that grass darker or brighter. So you can still go through and kind of play with this so you can get the different levels that you want within this piece. All right. Now the way that this is working, and I'm going to turn this off here, you can also change your adjustments by clicking up here. So it's either down here or up here. They both look like half circles. Once you've got that selected, it's going to adjust black and white everything that is below it. So if I were to move this down, you can see now the foreground monuments in color. It's going to make a little bit more sense if I move it here. You can now see that this midground trees and foreground are in color because they're higher up here. Now the buildings, and then if I were to go all the way back here, even Godzilla's in color, but the background is in black and white. All right, so it's just the adjustment layers affect everything beneath them. We'll go into more detail as to what these other options are with adjustment layers and how to make an adjustment layer just work on a certain section of an area with our next assignment. So that is the thing that we went over today in class. I really would encourage you guys to play around with this a little bit tomorrow if you get a chance, maybe in between classes or during lunch or something, just so you can familiarize yourself with it. As a reminder, next Monday, so a week from today, is when this assignment's due. So we'll only have Wednesday coming up for you guys to work on it in class with me there to help you out. So, play with this a little bit and make sure if you have any questions that you ask them of me tomorrow or Wednesday. That's it. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Bye.